In the mid-2000s, Lotus made a big decision. They'd had great success with the Lotus Elise and the track-based Exige, but they wanted to appeal to a wider marketplace. So what they did, they wanted to create a more usable, daily Grand Tourer, but still maintain some of the Lotus core values in regard to lightness and handling. And so was born this, the Lotus Europa. At launch, criticised in many aspects, but what I want to know now is 15 years on, these cars are still retaining around 80% of their new price back in 2006. And I want to see what one of these is like now, 15 years later, to drive. It's Rich here with another Fast and Fun video. So they're all built between 2006 to 2010, and they were based on the bonded aluminium chassis that the Elise and the Exige were famed for, but in Europa fashion it was a little bit longer, about 110 millimeters longer. And instead of using the high revving Toyota engine, they went with a GM Vauxhall unit. In fact, the Europa's more similar to the VX220 than the Elise or the Exige. And there was a reason that Lotus went with the Vauxhall turbocharged plant. You see, the Toyota engine was great, but it delivered all its best performance high in the rev range. And it's not an ideal everyday Grand Tourer engine. They wanted mid-range torque, they wanted usable performance, and that's why the Vauxhall turbo unit was used. Mid-mounted, rear-wheel drive, and coming in at 995 kilograms. Performance was good at around 5.5 seconds. The original car came with 197 brake horsepower and about 200 pound-feet of torque, and that was referred to as the S. And then in late 2008, early 2009, they brought out the SE, which upped that power through a revised turbo, a few minor changes, and remapped it to 222 brake horsepower. In total, only 458 Europas were built. And you compare that to the Lotus Europa from the 60s and 70s, that nearly 10,000 of those were built in that period. So these cars are rare. You just do not see these cars on the road. And that wasn't because it was a limited edition. It wasn't because of a limited run. It was just because the sales volumes weren't there. And why weren't they there? Well, Lotus tried to create the Grand Tourer, the Lotus Grand Tourer. They talked around the boot being 40% bigger than an Elise, which made an incredibly small boot a little bit bigger. But it's still a small boot. And being based on the Elise and VX220, there's no frunk either. And where the engine is, there's no space behind the rear seats. So it is the boot or the passenger seat in regard to luggage space. But they did make things a little bit easier. Access was about 55 millimeters, so just over 5 centimeters bigger, larger aperture to get in and out of. But it's still not what you call easy. It did come with carpets, a bit of soundproofing, stereo, air conditioning, to name a few things. The SE also came with a few other tasty options. Lighter alloys, moving to 18-inch at the rear. They came with AP racing brakes, revised suspension, a little bit lower, a little bit firmer, and they all came as standard with the luxury pack. The luxury pack, well, it was a few minor little updates here and there. Extended leather inside, starter button, wooden gear knob, just minor things that was an option on the S. But don't think now, 15, 16 years on, there's either the S or the SE, because even when they left the factory, there was a little bit of grey area in the middle, and as things have matured, what's happened is the owners of the cars have done this change and done that change, and suddenly every car is a little bit different. This specific one, for example, which, by the way, if you can see the white blossom that's covering the car, it's not lots of bird poo or stone chips. It is actually blossom from the tree above. But this one comes with the 18-inch alloys on the rear, and it's also been converted with the AP racing brakes, which increase the front disc from 288mm to 308mm to give better braking performance. All of the Europas came with 6-speed manual gearbox. There was no auto option. Of course there wouldn't be. It's a Lotus. But it did come with aircon. And to tell you the truth, I think that was a really, really good decision. And although it had ABS, there was no traction control. And I'm not sure about that. Is an everyday usable sports car, no traction control in a mid-engine rear-wheel drive sports car? I'm not convinced. One of the first striking things you notice when you look at the car is this one is in sort of a deep metallic red colour, canyon red colour, absolutely fabulous colour. It shows off all the curves, all the scoops, and there's I don't think there's a straight panel on the whole car. Set off with these magnificent black multi-spoke alloy wheels. It looks absolutely fantastic. Up at the front, what was at time, I think people commented on the headlights that are cutouts onto the front bumper. They're almost sort of Honda Integra DC5 type of headlights. And there's no front because you've got all the front radiator cooling. You've got the cooling fans there coming out of the bonnet. Single wiper blade as well on the really curved front windscreen. If you look down the side of the car, really good angle is, as you can see, how the front and rear arches, and now it pinches around the door. And it is a narrow car. Once you've got two adults sat in there, you will be rubbing shoulders. But the purity of Lotus still remains in regard to that close, compact nature. Look at the angular looks there going down this side profile. If you look onto the top of the roof, you've got, again, vents here for the engine and a lot of heat coming out. Even now, you can still feel the heat coming out from where the engine's been driven. The car's been driven this morning. The tail hatch now with the glass to see into the engine. Okay, it's not the best looking engine. We're not looking at some glorious V6 or V8 there, but even so, it's a nice touch from Lotus. At the back, it's got a sort of a ducktail spoiler on the back. And then these mesh. I'm not sure if these are actually just for aesthetics or there's actually some sort of cooling coming out of these mesh grills at the back of the car. Twin exhaust. And just, I love the fact that it looks different. It looks different to its competitors. And you would argue, well, when we take it for a drive, we'll talk about competitors. Who is the competitor for this car? If you lift the rear tailgate up, that's access to both the boot and the engine. It's adequate. Two of you would probably get a weekend away with a couple of soft bags. Probably not a lot else though. And then into the GM sourced 2-litre turboed engine. This one is believed to have been remapped. It actually came with a second ECU, which we assume will probably be the standard ECU, and the updated ECU will have been fitted. We walk down the side, fuel cap, and then there's no door handles as such. You just press the button, then pull on the lightweight doors. So I talked about having easier access into the car, but let's be quite clear here. We're not stepping into a Z4 coupe or a 370Z. The sill is still wide, it's still high, and the aperture to get in is still relatively challenging for myself at 100 kilos and 50-year-old bloke. Inside, this doesn't have a Lux pack, so this is pretty much base, but it still came with leather seats. We'll talk about how they feel once we take it. And then inside, there's absolutely no disguising what this is. Elise at its core. The rev counter on the left, the speedo on the right. Simplicity at its core to this car. What appears to be an aftermarket stereo, but no, that I think was actually standard with it. Inbuilt sat nav. That will be fun to see what that sat nav actually looks like nowadays. I think sort of Lotus probably went to Halfords and did a job lot on aftermarket stereos, and that was all about keeping the cost down and reasonable. And if you look around the rest of the dash, it's all, well, the door cards are leather lined with some sort of stitching that's, well, not exactly straight, but it's okay. This car's done 56,000 miles. You can see things like scratching and marking on the sills. It's to be expected. This one's actually floor mat carpets are just being replaced actually. So you've got the actual aluminium chassis that would normally come with carpet. There's no space in behind though. So something like a Cayman where you've got the option to put stuff on top of the engine, that doesn't exist because there's a little rear windscreen there separating the two drivers from the engine bay. The steering wheel, simple, pure at its nature there. No buttons, nothing, no distractions there. Just simply the airbag and a small steering wheel. Some came with starter button, say with the Lux pack or the SEs. This one doesn't have it. And then on the right hand side, some light switches, but that's it. It's simple, it's clear. Electric windows though did come as standard. Okay, there we go. Time to do what we need to, which is take this out and take it for a drive. First of all, I've got to work out how to get in it. This shows you how easy it is to access the driver's seat, I hope. And we're in. So I've just clambered into the car. It's snug. I've got the owner sat rubbing shoulders together. The headlining on this just a little bit saggy, so my 6 foot is actually in the headlining. There's no adjustable steering wheel, so it's probably a fraction too low, but there's certainly space going backwards and forwards. Really simple. I mean, the steering wheel is just reminiscent of the Series 1 Elise that I drove many years ago, in fact the late 90s. So put my seatbelt on. So this Grand Tourer, this is Lotus's view of what a Grand Tourer is. Wouldn't necessarily be my observation of being a Grand Tourer with, well, ingress and exit is challenging. Right, we're going to pull away. Join us in a few miles' time. So we're just about to come out of this 40. I'm only going 30 actually, so we'll just see what it's like. I'm pulling about 2,500 revs, 30 miles an hour. When we get to the national speed limit, we'll just extend it up onto this. This is sort of a fastish A road. So just gently accelerate. And there's an awful lot of that mid-range torque there. Pulls you along at a good speed relatively quickly, and just that first proper little right kink there. It's just so direct. You almost think what you're going to do, and it corners. There's a fair bit of road noise and tyre noise and wind noise, but it's not bad, not at all. Second gear. Up to 6,000 red light comes on. Oh, it's a little bit very twitchy. That lack of power steering, you can feel absolutely every ripple, everything on the road. To some people it might feel a little bit unnerving, but it is, yeah, it's tracking, it's moving, you can feel absolutely everything. Firm suspension, steering's tugging around on this sort of fast sweeping B road. Driving position wise, just prefer if I could just nudge the steering wheel up just slightly, but otherwise it does feel like you're sat right on the floor, which is great. That hard acceleration, it is quite addictive. It's not perfect, but my word, it has got serious performance. It goes really, really well. The view from the through the front's absolutely great. You've got the front wheel arches just protruding. You can't see anything at the front apart from these big wheel arches. And then when you look in the wing mirrors, you've got the back wheel arches as well, protruding like they're hunched up, and it just feels that a wheel in every corner. Visibility through the back is narrow, I think is the best way of saying it. It's obviously a very sloped back, so the window is quite narrow, and then you've got the ducktail lip spoiler on the boot as well that takes some of that visibility, so it's not great. The noise from the engine, not the best sounding engine, to be truthful. Probably an aftermarket exhaust would probably lift that to become something more sort of audible, a bit more exciting. It's a pretty average sounding car. When something looks this good, you expect it to sound that little bit better. So you don't need to rev the engine out because it's got that mid-range torque. You haven't got as much throttle response as you would do of a high revving engine, normally aspirated. It's just that wall of torque. It's not a delicate car. It's not high revving. It's not delicate. You're not balancing on the throttle. It's a bit. It's definitely hardcore. It's the suspension. The damping's good, but it's firm. You know you're in it. The steering wheel's tugging around. The turbo's coming in and out with a bit of turbo lag. It's an absolute intense driving experience. And to tell you the truth, Lotus saying it was a daily Grand Tourer, not at all. What is this car aimed at? Who is its rivals? Well, it's more heavy than the Elise, the VX220, because it's supposed to be at a market that is more dailyable. But if you look at the daily cars, Z4 Coupes, 370Zs, I'm not sure. This seems nothing like those cars. And probably from a driving perspective, Porsche is just probably close to Lotus in regard to handling and driver focused cars. But even something like the Cayman S 987 Gen 2, which I drove about 18 months ago, that's nothing like this. And so, I don't know, it's in this very niche middle ground. And actually, is it for people like me? You see, 25 years ago, back in, well, the late 90s, I can remember test driving one of the first Series 1 Elises. And I always wanted an Elise or an Exige. I've never considered going soft. But now, as a 50-year-old-ish, middle-aged bloke, getting into a Series 1 Elise would absolutely terrify me. But I could have 80 or 90% of that experience or something like this. And so maybe that's it. Maybe the answer is it hasn't got any competitors, and it's more aimed at people that 20, 25 years ago were the Elise owners. Values of these now sit from the sort of low 20s up to sort of mid-high 20s. That's 85% of what these cars cost new. So they're holding on to their money really, really well. And why is that? There's got to be something that is keeping the price really high. And for me, it's rarity. I can't remember the last time I saw one of these on the road. So what's my summary of my time in the Lotus? Well, for a start, let's dispel any myths. This is not, for me, a daily car. It's not a Grand Tourer at all. Could I drive 700 miles in it? Yes, absolutely, I think I could. But I certainly wouldn't want to be clambering in and out of this car in the deepest, darkest winter. It's not an easy car to waft along in. You've got to concentrate. It's a two hands on the steering wheel. There's some turbo lag in there. The ride is, if anything, a little bit too much on the firm side. But that's its compelling nature. It's lightweight, turbo lag, a rush of turbocharged power, mid-range torque, fidgety, direct steering, intoxicating. It's great that cars like this exist. Driver-focused car. It might not be quite as sharp as when there's the Elise, the Exige, but you know what? I love the looks. And I love the fact that it's a rare car. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed it, as always, please thumbs up, subscribe, comment. See you next week for another video. Thanks for watching.